I am David Sanford of Sanford Heisler Sharp McKnight, chairman of the firm, a national civil rights law firm. And I am here in our New York office, delighted to spend some time with one of my partners, Andrew Melzer. Andrew has been with us, hard to believe, Andrew, since 2007. He co-chairs our national wage and hour practice, and he has been instrumental in so many of the firm's successes these past 19 years. Welcome, Andrew.
Well, thank you, David. It's great to speak with you and to have been part of the firm for since 2007.
We've spent a lot of time together working on cases and talking about our families and our lives, but I don't think we've ever really drilled down into your life and explored a little bit about your background growing up. Take me back in time to the time when you were a little boy growing up, and talk about some of the formative influences, where you grew up, what the family life was like, and take me through all the way to college.
I grew up on Long Island, New York, town called Merrick, with my family. My family had a formative influence on me. Ended up at Yale University, and ultimately NYU Law School.
So you grew up and you were an only child, or did you have siblings?
No, I have a younger sister.
Your younger sister.
So we grew up in a house of two children, parents, grandparents.
You have a close relationship with your grandparents?
I did, but at that time.
Yeah. And so
that was very special to me.
You describe your childhood briefly. Obviously, you were extremely successful academically. You got into one of the most elite programs in America, Yale University. What do you attribute your academic success early on, leading to your admission to Yale? What do you attribute to that? What forces, what people, what influences early on led you to be as academically gifted as you obviously were?
Thinking about it, I would attribute it to a couple of things. One would be just always being a voracious reader from a young age. And another one would be, having parents who placed a very high value on education and constantly stressed education as a path to do anything you want in life.
Well, if you have parents who are promoting education and clearly indicate early on the value of education, the importance of reading, the importance of school, the importance of homework and doing well, you are at least halfway there, right? And so you obviously had
right.
that. But you also had, the intellectual curiosity to do all the things you did, right? Through school, through grade school, and at Yale and NYU and since. There are a lot of influences in life, right?
I think when you have a project or something that you take on to, dive into it, look at it as a puzzle, as a challenge, as something that you want to sink your teeth into. Whether whatever it is, an academic project or anything that you encounter, as something that you're doing.
Yeah. You obviously excelled academically and wound up at Yale University. When you were at Yale, what did you study, and what were some of the major moments as you recall?
I studied history at Yale. Never really limited myself to one area or field of study. So I majored in history and did a senior thesis on aspect of diplomatic history emerging from the U.S. Civil War, but also studied literature and a number of other things.
So drilling down on that thesis, what was the focus on the Civil War?
Britain had built a number of ships for the Confederacy, commerce raiders, and they did a lot of damage to Union shipping. After the war, there was one of these ships was called the CSS Alabama. The claims that the American government brought against the British government for permitting this to happen were grouped under the rubric the Alabama claims. So after the war, there, as part of a treaty between the United States and Britain, the British agreed to resolve the Alabama claims and send them to international arbitration. What I explored were sort of the history and context of that, but what were the diplomatic things going on in the world, the international conflicts in Europe and otherwise that influenced Britain to be willing to resolve those claims, to get on favorable terms with the United States.
Interesting. Did you know when you were working on that thesis and when you were at Yale generally that you wanted to be a lawyer?
I had a decent idea, but I wasn't completely sure about it.
What was the moment you realized, or what influences led you ultimately to apply to law school?
It was really, seeing what I could do with the law, and applying my own talents and skills and passions for research, writing, problem solving, analysis, to be able to help people and make a difference. So once I, came upon public interest in civil rights law and the ability to use the law to achieve social justice, I went with it, and I haven't really stopped.
You went to NYU, which is one of the preeminent law schools in the world, probably the law school that is preeminent, certainly with respect to public interest law. Did you go to NYU with the idea of doing public interest work?
I did. That was my goal and focus from the outset, was to be doing public interest work and developing, legal skills that I could apply to public interest work and helping clients and working towards social justice.
You did something really fascinating coming out of law school. Describe that.
So after law school, first I clerked for 2 years in Boston. And then after that, I had an opportunity to work for a non-governmental organization in Switzerland, in Zurich, as part of the process for adjudicating claims against the Swiss banks for what they did during the Holocaust in terms of appropriating or the bank accounts belonging to Holocaust victims.
And that work had been going on for some time, and I think it postdated you as well, did it not?
Yeah, so there was a litigation that was pursued in the Eastern District of New York, and there was a tribunal, a process set up to adjudicate the claims once there was a settlement fund of over $1 billion, and to try to get the accounts that were, either appropriated or denied to victims and their heirs to match them as closely as possible to the right people and issue awards to their survivors and their heirs to restore, their assets.
Mm-hmm.
So going through bank records, going through people's accounts of their life and their documents, and trying to get the best fit in terms of restoring people's assets that they had lost during the period from 1939 to 45.
And that certainly, that kind of work was reflective of your passion for social justice, and also your connection to one of the darkest times in human history, Nazi Germany. You came out of that period, that 2-year period of doing that work. How, if at all, do you think it influenced what you subsequently did in the law?
The passion and commitment to rectifying injustices and achieving, redress for victims is the same, and it animates all the work that we do. and what I've done in my career. And I think it just the experience doesn't translate in every way, but if you put your nose to the grindstone and engage with the documents and the facts and the legal issues, there's results that can come out of it that are positive, that can address longstanding injustices and inequities.
Yeah. After that experience, joined us in 2007, as we mentioned earlier, 19 years. And that's an extraordinary run. We've been together, working together in the trenches for 19 years, have gone through so many cases, so many successes, so many wonderful experiences. Most of that time has been in connection with our partnership. I've been honored to call you a partner, to have you as a partner. You're really one of the most brilliant lawyers I know. You've done outstanding work at the highest level of the profession. And I mean that sincerely. I mean, it's really always a pleasure, as I've told you before, and I'll tell you now, to work with you, because I always know that I'm getting some of the best legal thinking, some of the most creative legal thinking, and some of the best legal writing that exists in the world with you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We have worked in a number of areas, always with the mindset of, as I mentioned, working towards, helping our clients navigate difficult situations in their lives and trying to achieve, a measure of justice and often creating, greater change through our cases, through taking on policies and practices perpetuated by powerful institutions that we're always taking on in the employment sphere, and otherwise. We've done a lot of employment discrimination cases, wage and hour cases involving people who are deprived of the wages that they're entitled to, the wages compensation that they're entitled to, being part of working environments where their rights are being violated. So we are taking on those cases and helping people to get redress for those situations. And other than employment, we've done cases involving prisoners' rights, wrongful death, employment retaliation, housing, uninhabitable housing conditions, consumer fraud. Just all sorts of different ways that employers, institutions take advantage of people and affect their, violate their rights.
When you think about some of the class action matters we've done, and we've taken on more class action matters than the vast majority of plaintiffs' firms, probably the vast majority of plaintiffs' firms taken together. But when you think about the class action matters that we've worked on, what stands out to you? What few cases resonate the most with you or are most memorable?
As I've talked about, we had a housing case where, based on faulty construction and other similar issues, people were living in environments where they were freezing and not having adequate heat. So we had a class action to address that situation that resulted in improvements to the facility and also monetary relief for people who were suffering and had suffered those conditions. We've had wage and hour class actions where employers find ways by misclassifying people, whether as exempt salaried employees or independent contractors, to avoid paying them what they're entitled to. That affects people in a number of ways. It's very much a kitchen table bread and butter issue when people aren't getting paid what they're supposed to. But when employers, avoid paying people overtime, it affects their lives in other ways as well. If an employer doesn't have to pay you overtime, guess who's doing all the extra work and working long hours without being compensated for it? So that's, very much a quality of life and family issue. And, also when employers aren't paying people overtime, it's an employment issue because they load the work onto a few people that they don't have to pay rather than hiring more workers. And that affects people's lives and the economy. So we've had cases along those lines. Of course, you remember the big gender discrimination case against Novartis, where we achieved, a major settlement and relief for clients who were victims of gender discrimination and being underpaid.
Well, we achieved the largest trial jury verdict in U.S. history in a gender discrimination case in that matter, which was a great result, and that was after really hard work by you and so many people in this firm over a period of 6 years leading up to that trial.
We're always on the lookout for other class actions in which we can, not only help our clients, but achieve a greater result, a transformative effect on an organization or institution to help a group of people who are encountering some sort of violation or exploitation of their rights.
So you've spent also a good period of your career representing women in gender discrimination matters, in particular so many female partners of top law firms in America. We've represented women in the majority of the AmLaw 100 firms at one point or another during the course of the last 15 years. What has that representation been like for you, representing some of these women both in court and, of course, through the pre-suit confidential settlement process?
I mean, it's very important to me to be working towards gender equity, even in a profession such as the law, and people at the highest ranks of their profession. Believe it or not, or maybe it is too easily believable, when people get to a certain point, there still is a glass ceiling, and that our clients have hit and encountered. We are working through these cases to level the playing field and make sure that everyone gets what they're entitled to and gets a fair shake and a fair shot, regardless of gender.
Well, I think that's an important thing to remember that most people don't realize, perhaps, because when you go higher up the ladder in society, people think that
everything's fine.
Right, but people even at the highest rungs experience often the same forms of discrimination with different values attached as people, in the lower ends of the socioeconomic strata. And we've represented people all the way from restaurant workers at Cracker Barrel to C-suite executives, CEOs of major corporations, and everything in between. What similarities do you see existing, say, in the cases that involve low-wage workers who are experiencing discrimination of one sort or another, or wage theft of one sort or another, and the forms of discrimination and wage theft that may occur at the higher reaches of society?
There's a number of things. I mean, the impact, there's a big impact on people's lives when they encounter discrimination or violations of their rights, regardless of whether they're at the lower ends of the wage spectrum or up at the top. And it's not as much of the same thing in terms of people's lives being at stake when they're, being able to feed themselves and their families. But, it's still an issue of encountering an artificial barrier to what you've earned and where you should be in life based upon things that are, it's really, impermissible under the law that shouldn't be determining where you end up. You should be able to achieve as much as you can based on the strength of your credentials and your ability. And it's also a matter of representation. People should get to the highest levels that they've earned, and it increases representation of women, of people from different backgrounds in powerful positions throughout society that has, an effect in terms of people being role models and representative of others.
You've done so much work in legal research and drafting at the trial court level, at the appellate court level, even at the Supreme Court level over the years. And you've seen and you've written about the changes in our jurisprudence. You're very well familiar with the very conservative trend in the Supreme Court, dating back to certainly Dukes v. Walmart, a case decided in, I believe, 2011 in a 5-4 decision, making it essentially much harder to bring a class action. The Concepcion Supreme Court case and a line of cases in the Supreme Court, and since then, of course, in the lower courts, mandating arbitration as opposed to what we always viewed as a right to vindicate your rights in court. How does that conservative trend impact your practice, and what ways do you see being available to us and to other civil rights litigants as ways around that Supreme Court precedent, or what creative measures have you taken to avoid some of the pitfalls that would otherwise bedevil us because of that conservative trend?
There is a trend that is alarming that acts to curtail people's rights, that acts to prevent them from achieving justice when they're wronged. That shouldn't be there, are imposed, on behalf of corporations, on behalf of powerful institutions, to limit and curtail people's rights when they've suffered violations and wrongs. There is always a way. We can't always pursue the paths that we used to. That would necessarily be the most effective and efficient way of addressing violations and injustices. But there will always be a way to do it if there is a clear and obvious wrong through one method or another. Being more selective and careful in crafting legal theories to tailor them to the jurisprudence. Advocating for new laws and changes in the law that will increase people's rights and access to justice. I've writing articles about the law and proposals for where it should go, calling society's attention to violations and harms in other ways than through the legal process, through media and other avenues. So, using all of the tools at our disposal to shed light on and address these issues when our clients experience them and when they come to our attention.
You have been so vital in this firm in so many ways. One of the ways has been your trial advocacy. You've been a part of a lot of trials that we've done. I think in the firm's history, we may have lost 3 trials overall, but we've won all the rest, and that adds up to a big number, and you've been a part of many of them. What trial sticks out among others for you?
This may have been the first one that I did. We had a trial in federal court in San Francisco involving an inmate who suffered a young guy with young kids at home, suffered a easily treatable sickle cell crisis while incarcerated, and was completely ignored, neglected, accused of faking it, and died, became dehydrated, lost a quarter of his body weight in a week, and died, leaving a grieving family behind. And we brought part of that case to trial. Ultimately there was a hung jury, but I think it was a very important experience.
Well, there was a hung jury, and we wound up settling for a very good number for the family. And this was a case, by the way, that was brought to us by the NAACP.
In Sonoma County.
In Sonoma County. He had reached out to the NAACP, and the NAACP reached out to us to see if we could help the family, which you and the trial team did. Yeah, that was a great result. It was a very tragic story.
Oh, absolutely. This was one of the most preventable deaths that have
terrible story
have occurred. Yep. With the incarcerated individual.
Heartbreaking.
But all they needed to do was give him an IV, and they accused him of faking it and blamed him and neglected him, and everything that could have been done wrong and in a cruel way happened.
Yep.
And, obviously you never want to see that, but it was certainly gratifying to represent the family and reach a good result that will, help with his children's education and supporting them for their lives.
So we, in our firm, bring individual cases on behalf of individuals. We bring multi-party cases on behalf of two or more individuals. We bring collective actions and class actions, larger group cases to vindicate the rights of small and large groups. A lot of people don't necessarily know the ins and outs of those distinctions. What would you say to the viewers who are curious to know what the advantages are of bringing a collective action on behalf of a large group or a class action on behalf of a large group?
I mean, there are definitely advantages to it, and things that can be achieved in a class action or collective action efficiently in one case. It does vindicate the rights of a larger group of people, which can create change in an organization for a large group of people affected by a common policy or practice, achieve relief for a large group of people who have suffered in a common way, to get compensation and other relief that will address the situation. Instead of potentially filing dozens or hundreds or thousands of individual cases and relying on that to address a problem, which things are always going to fall through the cracks. Many people won't be covered by that, and it's a vast and inefficient use of time and resources to have lots of individual cases for the same thing, again, which won't cover or provide relief to everyone. Class actions are an effective tool to take on systematic practices when employers, corporation, institutions are harming a group of people with their practices. To address that, we can achieve monetary relief for people who have been affected in a way that the law recognizes in terms of damages, and we can get, in many cases, injunctive or programmatic relief to take on and fix the practices that resulted in the problems and caused the harm. And it's a lot more. You can't really do that if you're pursuing an individual matter for one person or a handful of people. In order to take on a broader practice and ameliorate and address that practice, it is the avenue that really lets you do that in an effective way would be a class or collective action where you're representing a group of people who can demonstrate that some policy or practice has resulted in a systematic harm.
Andrew, it's been my pleasure to sit here and talk about the law and your life with you. It's been my sincere pleasure to have worked with you for 19 years, and I hope we get many more decades together in partnership. Thank you.
Thank you.